Epilogue. Harrison Ambler closed his eyes and felt the gentle glow of the March sun. Lying on the deck-top chaise lounge, he could hear sounds, soothing ones. The water lapping gently against the hull of the fishing boat, the sound of a spinning reel as the fishing line was cast. Other sounds, too. He finally knew what it felt like to be a family man, and contentment welled up within him. On the other side of the boat, the son and daughter, bickering playfully as they baited a fishing hook, the mother reading the newspaper, casting a rod of her own, and intervening with a wry, loving look when the kids got too rambunctious. He yawned, felt a slight twinge of pain, and adjusted his loose-fitting t-shirt. Bandages still ridged his midriff, but after 2 operations, he was healing up. He could feel it, could feel his strength starting to return. The sun glittered off the lake, a small one in the Shenandoah Valley region, and though it was not yet spring, the weather was balmy, in the mid-50s. He decided that he would probably never return to the Sourlands, but he still loved boats and lakes and fishing, and he was glad to be with others with whom he could share his expertise. The scene was not as tranquil as it looked, to be sure, not with the demons that still chased themselves inside him, not with 2 rambunctious teenagers and their tart-tongued, attractive mother, but somehow it was better this way, more real. "Hey, Daddy-o," the boy said. At 17, he was already broad-shouldered and deep-chested. "Got you a ginger ale from the cooler? It's still cold." He handed Ambler the can. Ambler opened his eyes and smiled at him. "Thanks," he said. "You sure you don't want a beer?" asked the woman. Not young, but elegant and very funny. "There's a Guinness somewhere in Breakfast of Champions." "Nah," Ambler said. "Gotta start slow." Yes, it felt good being a family man. He could get used to this. Not that it was his family exactly. As a gentle, barely detectable ripple moved the boat ever so slightly, Clayton Caston clambered up from below deck, sweating and green at the gills. He leveled a baleful, reproachful gaze at Ambler and dry swallowed another Dramamine. Linda, anyway, knew a thing or two about fishing, and the kids were an easy sell. Getting Clay to come along was more of a struggle. Clay was right to have been skeptical of the promised tranquility, though only a high-grade hypochondriac like him could have convinced himself that he was suffering from seasickness on the near-motionless lake. "How I ever allowed myself to be talked into coming aboard this vomit-inducing vessel," Gaston began. "Envy you, Clay," Ambler said simply. "Do you realize that the actuarial odds of drowning in a domestic body of fresh water are actually greater than the odds of drowning while at sea?" "Oh, come on. Fishing is one of the great American leisure time activities. Like I told you, it's the most fun you can have without a spreadsheet. Just give it a chance. You might even turn out to be good at it." "I know what I'm good at," Caston groused. "You're full of surprises. Bet you even surprise yourself sometimes. Who knew you were such an ace with the AV equipment?" "I told you," Caston said. "My assistant walked me through all that stuff. All I know about coaxial cables otherwise is their purchase price per meter and the recommended amortization table." But from a self-satisfied look on Caston's face, Ambler could tell he was remembering what happened after Whitfield and Palmer discovered that the bilateral room had discreetly been turned into a closed-circuit TV studio, and that their entire conversation had been fed to the Congress Center's media center. Both the scholar and the political official were mesmerizing in their sheer fanaticism. Hundreds of Davos participants could agree about that as they watched their faces on the video monitors that were mounted throughout the conference center. It took Palmer and his protege little time to realize the implications, not merely for their own futures, but for their plan. Like many a dark venture, the one thing it could not survive was exposure to light. As Caston recounted to Ambler during one of a number of hospital visits, Caleb Norris was the one who directed the Swiss military policemen to the bilateral room and made sure that the conspirators were taken into joint service custody. He had been alerted, as it turned out, by an emergency message that a Chinese spymaster named Chao Tang had arranged to have delivered to him personally. It was an unusual step, to say the least, but top-level spy officials often made a study of their opposite numbers. The two men had never met, but each had a distinct sense of the other. In a situation of extremity, Chao decided to enlist the personal assistance of an American. Then, too, the fact that the Chinese spymaster was reported dead soon thereafter served as powerful authentication. As a heavily sedated Ambler had drifted in and out of consciousness during the first weeks he spent in the hospital, Caston had to tell him what happened several times before he understood it wasn't just a dream, an artifact of the narcotics. Later, when he was mentally alert, if still physically debilitated, other visitors arrived. Some visits organized by Caston, some not. A fellow from state named Ethan Zackheim dropped by twice with lots of questions. There were a couple of visits from Caston's assistant who thought Ambler was super and kept making comparisons to Derek somebody or other. There was even a visit from Dylan Sutcliffe, the real Dylan Sutcliffe, although given the 50 pounds he'd put on since Carlisle College, it took Ambler a moment to recognize him. And as they paged through the college yearbook, he had lots of fun stories about college hijinks, most of which Ambler remembered just a little differently. Caston himself had spent a fair amount of time figuring out the methods by which calls had been rerouted and the aberrations in service billings that resulted. Well, Ambler said after a while, shifting slightly on the top deck chaise lounge, your broadcast career might have been brief, but it was mighty effective. Sunshine is the best disinfectant, right? Caston suddenly blinked. Did the kids put on sunblock? He asked his wife. It's March, Clay, Linda replied, amused. March? Nobody's exactly sunbathing here. A delighted squeal and a shout from the other end of the fishing boat. I caught it, it's mine. Andrea's voice, prideful and emphatic. Yours? Max's voice, a teenager's not quite convincing baritone. Yours? Excuse me, but who cast the line in the first place? Who baited the hook? I just asked you to hold on to the goddamn rod while I got some... Language, Linda interjected warningly. She went over to the squabbling pair. Language? What, English? Max balked. Anyway, that fish is too small, their mother went on. You kids better throw it back. You heard what Mom said, Andrea said gleefully. Throw your teensy-weensy fish back in the water. Oh, so it's my fish now? Max's voice broke in a squawk of indignation. Ambler turned to Clay Caston. They always like this. Afraid so, Caston said happily. Caston sneaked a glance at his wife and kids across the deck, and Ambler could see the pride and devotion that pulsed through him, his lifeblood. But the auditor was not distracted for long. A few minutes later, when another gentle ripple moved through the craft, he plopped himself down on the canvas chair next to Ambler, readying himself for a serious entreaty. Listen, can we just turn the boat around and get back on shore? Caston was almost pleading. Why would we want to do that? It's a beautiful day. The water is lovely. We've rented this incredible boat. How could we be doing better? Yeah, but this was supposed to be a fishing trip, right? See, I think you'll find that all the fish are lurking around the dock. In fact, I'm sure. Come on, Clay, Ambler said. That doesn't stand to reason. He arched an eyebrow. The most probable distribution of fish this time of the year. Trust me, Caston implored, cutting him off. The dock's the place to be. I've got a good feeling about this.